Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who's on the other end of a phone line and I presume has the same number of teeth as he did yesterday. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello, same number of teeth, voice, even scratchier.
So no more dental accidents, but you are, I believe we're catching you between coaching sessions, is that right?
You are correct, yes.
So just to set the stage for our listeners, I'm going to guess that you're like in a parking lot before you go in and run a session?
Yep, pretty much.
Brilliant.
You go set up the field and then I go collect small children. That's correct.
And then teach them how to play soccer for the future of America.
So like herd them into like smaller groups. But yeah, pretty much that's it.
First the herding, then you explain gegenpressing. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the logical step. We do how to control the soccer ball, how to dribble a soccer ball, and then gegenpressing. That's number 3.
Perfect. That's the correct progression. I'm pretty confident that's how it should go.
That might be what Jurgen Klopp does when he takes over teams, though. He's like, all right, we're going to learn how to trap a ball properly. Now we're going to gegenpress. Let's do it.
Well, since we're talking Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool, let's talk Champions League draw. It happened, for US time, it happened early this morning. And we found out...
Or did it?
That's going to be Liverpool versus Roma in the one semi-final and Bayern versus Real Madrid in the other one. Before we talk actual soccer, the first I heard of a possible fix was a text from you saying that you had read that the Champions League draw may be fixed. So I'm not convinced that this is true, but why don't you tell me why you sent me that text? What did you read and where did you read it?
Well, I have Illuminati contacts, and they always let me know what's going on. No. I sent you that because, and I don't really believe that. It's just, it's fun. I sent you that because I was reading some comments about the draw while I was waiting for my last lesson to begin. And people were pointing out that I guess the official AS Roma site had begun selling tickets to AS Roma v Liverpool before the draw had actually happened. So then people were speculating that maybe like somebody already knew, and I think it connected to Sepp Blatter a while back saying that sometimes they did use like hot and cold balls to let people know, like to make people draw certain ways. Whether or not what Sepp Blatter said is true, I don't know, but I tend not to believe what he says. And I think that I'm leaning towards either it was some sort of like clerical error mistake where they were just trying to like get up a mock site for selling tickets, or more likely somebody has faked that site. So
I did read a thing that it was probably photoshopped, and the identifier of it being photoshopped was some language at the top of the page in Italian, but referencing a law that was passed in 2005 about needing to bring ID. And I think that sort of that flags it as being not a current ticket sales webpage from Roma. And the name of the paper, by the way, that reported this was Il Tempo, which is a great name for a Roman newspaper. But that's the only source of this so far.
Does Il Tempo translate to like the Times?
Yeah, it has to, right? But it also hilariously in English sounds a little bit like ill-tempered. So yeah, but I think it does mean the Times.
I was wondering, am I mistranslating that? Because it does feel like, we're ill-tempered journalists. We're always in a bad mood, and that means we're really good at investigating Photoshop.
So I don't know, I'm often, I think, quite naive about corruption stuff, but my question would be, why would they fix this? Why is Liverpool, Roma, and Bayern, Real what they would fix? It seems to me like 4 good teams, they all play each other. Like, there's nothing to be gained from any... As far as I can see, there's nothing to be gained from any particular combination of those 4 teams. So why would they fix it at all?
I think, first off, to your initial point, I think usually when you see fixes, it's usually either to like make sure that you get the 2 big teams with the biggest storyline. So then you can, that's when the rumors come about, is that like, oh, you've got Man City versus Bayern Munich, so it's Pep versus Pep's old team. Like, you can get that. Or maybe sometimes people have rumors about drafts being fixed because you want big franchises to get the big name players.
Yeah.
In this situation, the only thing I can think is maybe just that there's been some talk that like the Champions League has gotten like stale. I don't necessarily agree with that, but there's an idea that maybe you get the same teams in there in the semifinals every time. You get the same teams in the final. Yeah, I think there was a study that came out even with Roma and Liverpool making it, the last 5 years of the Champions League have been like the most consistent teams in the knockout rounds ever.
Yeah.
So you could, I guess there could be the argument that like they wanted to make sure that one of those perceived underdog teams, Roma or Liverpool, made it to the final. So you did have a little bit of variety, but that's the only thing I can think. And even then, that is a lot of work to do to ensure
Yeah.
a team that has won the Champions League several times or a team that has been in the Champions League consistently is in the Champions League final.
Yeah, and it's not like Liverpool, Roma are, to use a famous Liverpool reference, Accrington Stanley. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
These are all
exactly.
big teams. There's no real underdog in the true sense of that word.
I think Roma probably are, in my opinion, just because you have so much money in
Barcelona
so
thought
much money
that
in the
too.
League. Well, you can be the team that beats the favorite and still be the underdog. And I would say, just looking at the money that's available in the Premier League and the money that Liverpool has spent, and then obviously Real Madrid, they're no stranger to spending money, although they haven't lately. Bayern Munich are Bayern Munich. So I would say that probably Roma is the underdog. But even then, I would say not big enough, to your point. Yeah, it's not like Accrington Stanley have made the Champions League final.
And I raise a glass of milk to Accrington Stanley. So let's talk actual soccer, Taylor. All right, so
Sure.
The first game we'll be seeing, it will be Tuesday, April 24th. So that's about 10 days away, so a week on Tuesday. The first leg of the first semi-final is Liverpool versus Roma. It's Mohamed Salah welcoming his old team to Anfield. So the easy question, or the exciting question, is what appeals to you about this game? Because for me, anyway, I'm a little bit amped about both of these games, and I'm sort of ready for me and you to watch it in the office and break it down. I think Champions League semi-finals are one of my favourite things. So what are we looking forward to in Liverpool versus Roma?
I'll be perfectly honest and say, I can't claim to be so familiar with Roma. I've seen them a little bit. Obviously, we've seen them in the Champions League, but I can't say I know exactly what they're going to do. I'd say I'm more comfortable with Liverpool.
Roma, I think Roma's the team that wears light blue and they fly an eagle around before the game.
Yeah, send those emails to Daryl at TotalSoccerShow.com. But I would say, I think for Liverpool, anytime you have a team where everybody knows exactly what they're doing and has bought into it completely, so you're going to see a Liverpool team that is capable of doing what Liverpool is capable of doing, scoring 4 goals potentially and being very exciting and being very high energy. And I think what we saw from Roma in their second leg game against Barcelona was that Eusebio Di Francesco is more than capable of tinkering where he needs to, but not so second-guessing himself that it leads to another blowout or bigger mistakes. And so it feels like it's going to be a lot of tactical masterclassery, is what I'm going to put that, because Klopp, his team is going to know exactly how they're going to play. And then I could see Roma, especially in that first leg, being a little bit more cagier, trying to exploit a few little specific weaknesses. And so there's I feel like it'll be tactical chess versus I don't know, strategic chess or something like that. I can't really find a good analogy, but I think you get what I'm getting at.
I'm really hoping that Roma just go from the very beginning, sort of do what they did against Barcelona in that second leg, which was to go really high energy, high press, and then we'll just see two teams going after each other. And especially, I'm looking at those midfield. If you think of the midfield of Liverpool, say that it's Henderson, Oxlade-Chamberlain, and Milner again. And they're so sort of hardworking, energetic, capable of really shaking you off the ball, but also really smart, quick passes when they get the ball. Especially Liverpool's first goal against Man City is a good example of that. Even though it's Wijnaldum instead of Henderson, but you know what I'm saying? They all do the same, are capable of the same job. But then you got that sort of Roman sort of warrior midfield, I think is what we called it, with De Rossi, Nangolan, and Strootman. I think that's a really good contest between two trios of aggressive midfielders battling it out for territory in the middle of the field. I'm up for watching that.
I am equally up for that, and I'll be honest, I'm also very excited for Real Madrid Bayern Munich.
All right, do you want to talk about that?
I mean, sure. I mean, it's basically, I think, I don't know if it's because, I guess we always pay this amount of attention to the Champions League, but for some reason, for not having any vested interest in any of the teams still involved, I'm very excited for both of these draws, because I feel like Roma and Liverpool, for everything you just said, it's just going to be a really exciting game, and it could be open-ended insanity, and it could be 4-4 after the first leg, or it could be more cagey. It's just going to be any number of things. And
can I give you my final thing I'm excited about for Liverpool Roma is, I've been very pro the talents of Virgil van Dijk. And we're not going to get to see him in the World Cup for the Netherlands, obviously. He's only been at sort of a higher level team since January. I think this is a big test for him to go up against Edin Dzeko for Roma. Especially when you see the way Dzeko kind of destroyed Barcelona's defenders, the way he literally was too strong for Gerard Piqué, even as Piqué was trying that sort of slightly sneaky grab onto your wrist stuff. So I feel like this is a real test for Van Dijk to take on Edin Dzeko.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially if Roma do what they did with the two strikers with Dzeko and Schick.
Yeah.
Then I could see Lovren and Virgil van Dijk having their hands full a little bit with the physicality
and do you remember,
that Roma attack.
Do you remember, was it Romelu Lukaku who destroyed Dejan Lovren a couple times when Manchester United played Liverpool? So that's another one to watch out to see if Lovren can handle Dzeko as well. If I was Dzeko, I think I'd be drifting towards Lovren and away from Van Dijk.
Yeah, I think that's a safe bet. No, I mean, then again, Lovren seems to have been a little bit rejuvenated. Put that captain's armband on him. Suddenly he's reliable. Yeah. So we'll see what happens there.
All right. Maybe we'll get more detailed as that game gets closer. All right. To the other game. So a week on Wednesday, it's going to be Bayern Munich at home hosting Real Madrid. Here's the thing. A bit of news that you might not have noticed. Bayern have announced that Niko Kovac, the Frankfurt coach, is going to be their coach next season. Which means once again, I think it was today or last night they announced it. Once again, Jupp Heynckes is in the Champions League semi-finals. He's top of the Bundesliga. He's in the DFB Pokal semi-finals. He's on course for a treble, and once again, he's retiring at the end of the season. So he's kind of got that weird thing where it's all set up for him to go out in an identical blaze of glory to what he did in 2013.
Man, he's just going to keep raising expectations, isn't he? Right? He's going to swoop in, win the treble, and then just hop right back out.
Yeah, and apparently any team that just feels like winning a treble can just maybe hire Jupp Heynckes. But we're definitely getting ahead of ourselves, right? Because Bayern they've got some work to do before that happens.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, and I think it's going to be a pretty difficult task. I mean, then again, you never know. I mean, it was real close for Juventus there. So it could be close, could not be close. Again, that's what's fun about the Champions League semifinals, although I have a feeling Madrid will be a little bit more up for this one. Sergio Ramos back in the lineup, maybe not taking their foot off the gas pedal like before the second game even starts.
Yeah, did you read Sergio Ramos? There's a possibility he was going to be in trouble for...
that's right.
So he was banned, right, for yellow card accumulation in the game against Juve. He was supposed to stay in the stands. But when things got dramatic towards the end of that game, he was down in the tunnel, I think, to get sort of the closest view he possibly could. I think he was hoping he could hide in the tunnel and no one could see him. He got seen, but it seems the news I read this morning is that he's not going to face any additional punishment. I think that maybe the UEFA was sort of thinking, yeah, we get it. You were excited. That's fine. So he's going to be allowed to play against Bayern Munich. That's bad news for Robert Lewandowski.
Yes, it is. My one question, and I don't know if you know this or not, is that, like, was he down there before Ronaldo scored the penalty, before the penalty happened?
I don't know. Yeah, he may have come running down as soon as the penalty's awarded, right?
What I was thinking, and like this is like I read that day, and I don't know if this is true at all. My assumption was just that he was down there because he thought they were going to lose, or he thought they were going to draw and thus be eliminated. Or you know what I mean? Lose 3-0 and then basically be out. So I got the impression that he was down there to like commiserate with his teammates and pick people up and be a good teammate. And then the penalty happened, and so he was kind of there and maybe violating rules, but maybe wasn't necessarily down there to like gain a competitive advantage or anything. Again, that's speculation, but that was the way I understood
either
that,
way, he's not in trouble and he can play against Bayern. So let's focus on this Bayern-Real Madrid game. I've got so many matchups that sort of just jump off the page. I started writing down like the sort of 1v1 matchups I'm excited to see in this game. The first one I wrote down, I think this is more me than maybe what the rest of the people in the world will be thinking, but Marcelo versus Arjen Robben. Because I think of Marcelo as, at this point, I think of him as the smartest left back in the whole world, right? And I've noticed there's that thing where everyone knows what Arjen Robben's going to do, right? Cut in from the right on his left foot and shoot. And I'm really interested to see, does Marcelo have a plan for this? Can he figure this out? And so that's the one matchup I'm really ready to take a look at.
I mean, do you really think that's going to be Marcelo's job to figure that out? I feel like Zinedine Zidane is probably going to have to be the one to come up with a plan and tactically drill that one into Marcelo.
Yeah, but sometimes it just comes down to what you do in the moment, right? Zidane can't predict everything Robben's going to do.
I mean, kind of. It's right. He's going to cut inside and shoot.
Well, hasn't he's got multiple different ways of doing the exact same thing.
I'm with you. And like Brazil fans, I'd say like cover your ears for a second here. You can earmuff it if you want. But like, I mean, there are ways to exploit Marcelo's like willingness to get forward and be involved in the attack.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened with that 7-1 loss, is that they kept exploiting the space in behind. So there's always ways to maybe see if Marcelo is prepared to defend. And so, yeah, I do think that's a pretty good matchups to target from you, Daryl, because it could be Marcelo stays back, but then does that help Madrid or does that cause attacking problems for them? Does he get caught out a little bit? I'll be very interested to see how he prepares for Arjen Robben, who himself, he knows that people know what he's going to do, and does he change it up, or does he kind of do what he always does?
I mean, I can give you a guess. Here's another one to keep an eye on. So in the Liverpool-Roma game, we said it's Mohamed Salah going back to the team that sold him last summer. And Roma said, we'll be enemies for 180 minutes, but we'll always be friends afterwards because they still love him there. For Bayern Real, it's James Rodriguez on loan from Real Madrid, who essentially deemed him surplus to requirements, on loan to Bayern Munich. So, and just so everyone is very clear, he's 100% allowed to play. You can't be sort of loan tied in the Champions League, as Chelsea found out with Courtois a while back. So James will be, I assume, playing for Bayern and will be out to sort of prove a point against Real Madrid. And then on the other side of the field, playing for Real Madrid, Toni Kroos, who sort of Bayern didn't value him highly enough to offer him the big contract and make him a star and keep him. He'll be playing for Real Madrid against his old team. I'm looking forward to that specific matchup.
Looking for slights, though, I'm going to guess that James feels a little bit more slighted than Toni Kroos.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're offering Toni Kroos a decent wage, and Bayern don't really ever like to offer too much money. I mean, that's not to say that they're stingy, but that they don't want to get into a position where they're shelling out £400,000
yes, it wasn't
€400,000 a season.
It wasn't like they offered him €100, right?
No. But I think you're absolutely right, though, that James, on the other hand, can definitely feel a little bit aggrieved. And if I'm Florentino Perez, I definitely don't want James scoring, not just because it's going to cause problems for your team, but if you remember earlier in the season, James was one of the three players that Cristiano Ronaldo mentioned as basically being players that brought in that valuable experience, that veteran presence that were sold in the summer, and now suddenly Madrid looked a little bit more vulnerable. So it sort of is if James does score a goal, then is Cristiano Ronaldo going to go out there and be like, see, this is what I'm talking about. This is why we needed him. This is why we should have kept him.
Yeah,
so I think
interesting.
Maybe Florentino Perez is going to be very interested in how to shut down James.
All right. So, I mean, I'm basically neutral in this game because it's just two big teams. But I think I am hoping for a James Rodriguez goal just so we can get the reaction shots of Real Madrid's sort of coaching staff, high-profile players, and maybe sort of boardroom level as well.
I think that'd be a good thing to check out. My final thing I wanted to note about this game, I'm assuming we'll see Casemiro return. I think that was definitely a tactical substitution that was made against Juventus where he came out at halftime.
Yeah.
My question will be, do we see Gareth Bale at all? Because Gareth Bale maybe felt a little bit more like punishment. You're not doing what I want you to be doing. You're out. I'm going to get somebody in who will do that. And if we don't see him, I do feel like maybe this is the end of Gareth Bale at Real Madrid, or at least we start to see a lot of rumors linking him with moves, most likely back to the Premier League.
Yeah, I think he'd do really well at Wolves. Okay, so in the second half of today's show, Taylor, I've got some listener questions for you, and maybe a bit of news as well if you've got time. But first, Taylor, are you hungry between coaching sessions by any chance?
I am indeed, my friend.
Do you happen to have with you an RX bar? Because RX bar is one of today's sponsors.
Would you like to know why I do not?
No. Yes. Why don't you have an RX bar?
Because I lost the coin flip. That is not a joke. We had one left at our house. Both my wife and I wanted it. We flipped a coin. She got it. And by coin, I mean we flipped the RX bar.
So Margaret won and she got the last RX bar.
Yeah, I wasn't happy about it.
Well, RX Bar is a whole food protein bar. That means it's made with 100% whole ingredients. The core ingredients do all the talking, and they're printed on the front of the packaging. 3 egg whites, 2 dates, and 6 almonds, and no BS, which I believe stands for Bart Simpson, Taylor. So no Bart Simpson in RX Bars.
I mean, I would hope not. Not just because, he's potentially human, if you want to go that route, but also because he's affiliated with Butterfinger, and I don't know what those things are. They're certainly not RX bars, so we don't need those.
They're certainly not. They're not as healthy as RX bar, because the RX bar's got no added sugar, no artificial colours, no artificial flavours, preservatives, or filler.
Yeah, I always go back to when the Simpsons episode where they banned sugar, and they throw all the Butterfingers into the fire, and they just get spat back out, and Chief Wiggum says, even the fire doesn't want them. But I will say I had to go to a convenience store in between lessons, and I was just looking at all the granola bars, and it was definitely a moment of you're not what I want. You're not what I want at all.
I genuinely find a lot of even protein bars are kind of not as advertised. That's why I genuinely love advertising RX Bar, because it sort of does exactly what it says on the packaging, does exactly what's promised.
Yeah, and they were for sale in the Wawa near our house, and I cannot tell you how excited I was to see that, because I really like them, and I do think that they're a very good product. So I'm happy that they are advertising, and I'm also happy that I get to eat them when I don't lose coin flips.
Listeners can even get an even better discount on RX bars for 25% off your first order. That's better than you'll find at any gas station. Go to rxbar.com/soccer. That's rxbar.com/soccer. Then enter the promo code soccer at checkout. You've got to do it twice to make it clear that you really want it. You get 25% off your first order. I will put the link to rxbar.com/soccer in today's show notes. How about that?
That works for me.
All right, Taylor, how much time have we got you for?
We got about 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. Okay, I'm going to give you some quick news, because it seems like you may have missed the news while you were coaching this morning. I'll get your quick reaction to this. Premier League clubs have voted to not use video assistant referee in the Premier League next season. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah, so based on sort of their experience in the FA Cup this year, they've said, we need to trial this a bit more. We are not interested in having this in the Premier League. Surprised?
Yeah, sorry, did you say Premier League clubs or Player League managers?
Premier League clubs.
Or Player League referees?
Basically, clubs. Each club essentially gets a vote at a Premier League meeting, and the vote went, we don't want it, not next season. Let's keep trialling it and wait till they've perfected it until we get it in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that surprises me, given the way, I think, number one, given the way it's kind of been, where there were a few hits or misses, but I think also just there seems to be a lot of negative reaction, specifically in the British press, to VAR, and I think that a lot of times it's the press championing something like VAR that helps it gain traction, and when you've got a lot of people rightly or wrongly saying, it takes too long, or it's inefficient, or it slows down the game, or whatever, that I think I'm not really surprised then to hear that the kind of consensus is we'll hold off until maybe it gets better.
Yep, and I'd say it's much easier to criticize something than to praise something. It's much easier to get people to support you and agree with you by criticizing something than to support something. And that's why I think VAR is always going to have an uphill battle in England, because everything does.
It's going to be held to the highest standard, so that in a way that, we get mad at referees, but we kind of move on. I feel like you see more think pieces about how VAR is what's wrong with modern society, and VAR is trying to destroy the modern game and the beautiful game, and blah, 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 blah. You don't hear that about Michael Oliver. You just hear a few curse words, and then people move on.
I got a bit more news for you. Italy, the Italian Football Federation, has announced that they will be playing the US men's national team November 20th. Guess who hasn't announced this game?
All right. I'm going to guess anyone affiliated with U.S. Soccer. Correct.
So only Italy has announced this so far. The reason I found this interesting is because, I'm sort of super pro the UEFA Nations League. This is a thing where Italy have got sort of one UEFA Nations League game scheduled against Portugal on November 17th, but then they don't have a UEFA Nations League game scheduled on the other international date, so they're playing the US on November 20th. So I'm looking at this as a good example of how we can still have the UEFA Nations League, and you can still use those other spare dates for friendlies, and that benefits the US because they can go and play teams like Italy, who almost qualify for World Cups.
So you said that game will be in November?
Yeah, November 20th.
So my question is, when does U.S. Soccer officially announce it, or do they just announce, tickets are available?
They announce it November 19th, I would imagine.
That sounds... I say that jokingly, but, I won't be surprised if they just announce that the roster is coming. That's the way they announce that friendly.
Okay, you got time for a couple of listener questions?
Sure.
I've got one that fits with the US national team topic. It's from Zach Lippert. Zach Lippert wants to know... Have you seen these questions, by the way? I'm not sure how much I'm springing on you because you're sort of in your car.
I have not.
Okay, get ready for this. Zach Lippert says, could US Soccer call up coaches like they do with players, at least until they find someone that works? So what Zach's proposing is, instead of just saying, Dave Sarri can have the job on an interim basis, and then instead of having to sort of make a decision at some point and be like, all right, this is the guy for the next 3 years, Zach's saying we could like call up Greg Berhalter and have him coach a game. Then call up Greg Vanny and have him coach a game. Call up someone not named Greg and have them coach a game. You know what I mean? Like, so keep giving coaches a tryout in each game, see how it goes, and then pick your favourite sort of towards the end.
See, actually, I just like the Greg's approach. I just want anybody named Greg gets to coach.
So this is outside of the box thinking, but I think it might not be a terrible idea.
I would like to hear why you think it's not a terrible idea.
Well, just because you actually would get to see what each coach wants to do, right? You could get one look at their team and everyone can sort of be like, no thanks, we'll move on. Or, oh, that looked good. Yeah, let's give him a go.
See, I feel like this comes on the heels of you saying about VAR that it's easy to be critical. So I feel like you're trying to rebound by being positive about this idea. Because for me, like I like the idea in theory, but in principle or in practice or in reality, what ends up happening though is that like you need time to like bed yourself in, get used to the players, figure out who can execute the game plan that you want to utilize. And if you only have one game to get everybody on the same page, you might not be able to do that. And then you risk basically, we lost 3-0 to Italy, who, even though they're not going to the World Cup, still a very good team. And then suddenly it's like, that guy's done, even though he only had 1 week to get somebody who's used to sitting back and being defensive to play like a high pressure system or vice versa.
Yeah.
So that would be the big problem I could see there.
I guess you would have to sort of have a control. You would have, if you think of this as an experiment, you would have to play the same opposition every time. Otherwise it's not fair, right? Because if Greg Vanny plays against Brazil, and Greg Berhalter plays against Honduras, then it's kind of unfair on the two different coaches, right? It's especially unfair on Berhalter.
I mean, shots fired at Honduras, but yeah.
For being not as good as Brazil.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is this is not the way that US soccer is going, right? They've already announced that they're going to have this general manager position. I read news this past week that they've already interviewed Ali Curtis, the former technical director at New York Red Bulls, and Ernie Stewart, who does a similar job at Philadelphia Union. I think used to do a similar job at AZ in the Netherlands. So the idea is to have the general manager in place, and then that general manager sets a long-term vision. And the long-term vision can't be, we're going to call up different coaches for different months and see what happens.
So I have a theory now about what's happened here with Zach, and I'm going to blame Kentucky Fried Chicken for this.
I have. How is this all going to fit together? I'm fascinated.
Because I feel like ever since KFC came up with this idea of like rotating the actor playing Colonel Sanders every like couple of commercials, I feel like that's where this came from. That suddenly it's like, let's do that with other stuff. Let's have rotating coaches and rotating CEOs. I see what's happening here.
You want Norm Macdonald to coach the national team?
I mean, kind of. To be nice and sarcastic. You'd have to get some good press conferences. I'm not sure he knows what soccer is or that it exists. But otherwise, yeah, sure. I mean, but I guess I do kind of like the idea of getting – it does provide opportunities for other people that maybe wouldn't necessarily be considered for the full-time gig. I mean, I'm not trying to say he deserves to be considered, but like that is what we're doing with Dave Sarachan a little bit, is like seeing if he can do it. I would assume it's kind of what they did with Bob Bradley. It is that interim approach. And I guess if you gave 10 different people 2 games each to see what they could do, I don't necessarily hate that because it gets more people involved, but I think it's not very practical because you're not going to get 20 friendlies. And it also, for the reasons I said before, it's just going to be difficult to get one system in place. So I guess that's where the interview and tape watching, film watching becomes all the more important.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea, but it's not practical, is it, to be able to do it?
No.
So
Reba McEntire should coach the U.S. national team.
You got time for one more question?
The new KFC Colonel Sanders. Sure.
I didn't know that. Michael Pearsall wants to know, in general, how do announcers tell if a player, quote, meant, unquote, to do something? For example, Pulisic didn't mean to shoot, he meant to cross for that goal for Dortmund last weekend. So how do announcers know what a player meant to do? And I think I know your answer because I've seen you do it in this very office.
Oh, I was going to say they don't. So that's troubling.
Well, here's the thing. The thing I see you looking at is where the player is looking.
Yeah. I mean, that's it, right? Is when you watch, I think in the moment it's difficult to tell. I think when you go back and watch, if you see Christian Pulisic pick his head up, spot Batshuayi in the box and put his head down and try to cross, to me, that's him spotting the cross. If you see him looking at the top corner of the far post,
yep,
that he's looking to shoot. And I think that is a big indicator. And also just the way they shape up with their body before they play the ball. If he's like, there is that, you can tell when it's you can tell when it's a chip versus a cross just by the way you're like swinging to try to put bend on the ball versus maybe not falling through. So you're putting more of a chip into it. I think you can tell from some of the mechanics as well.
Yeah, I think mechanics is a good, as well as the sort of where they're looking, I think mechanics is a good one because once you've watched enough soccer, which you would assume and that most announcers have, then you almost unconsciously recognize what the mechanics of certain moves look like, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And obviously some players can put a weird disguise on it, but that's a whole next level thing that they're doing. At a basic level, the mechanics should match up with what was intended. And sometimes if the mechanics says cross but the ball goes in the net, then you know that a player was actually trying to cross and not shoot.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think if it wasn't obvious from the way we do the podcast, I'm a big believer in feeling words and thinking words. So I feel that he did this. I think he did that versus stating it factually. And I also do think that's kind of a big part of doing that commentary is sort of making it clear that you're not saying, oh, this is clearly what he meant to do versus like, I think he was trying to do this. And I say that, and the reason why I said the announcers don't know in the very beginning is because I think you and I both kind of hate that like verbal narrative crutch of like, oh, he's coming on and he's thinking I'm going to score a goal. And it's like, no, he's not. You have no idea what he's thinking. He might be thinking, I've got to give this note to the center back so he knows what to do. He might be thinking, I hope I score because my girlfriend is in the crowd. You know, like he might be thinking, just to try to like,
he might be thinking, I'm hungry. I got to get through 45 minutes. And I'm going to get something to eat.
Exactly. So I get annoyed when you hear announcers do that sort of like, oh, he's thinking he's up for it. It's like, oh, thank you.
Because
that's valuable insight.
But it turns all soccer players into like weird automatons, right? Where the only possible thing you can be thinking when you come on is this or that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And so that's the one that I'm always wary of is whenever somebody is telling me exactly what a player is thinking, I would prefer to hear that in a post-match interview if the player was thinking that. And I do think you can see that sometimes when you ask when they get asked a question and they definitely do not agree with the reporter's take, they will let you know. And I think those make for very interesting interviews. But I think going all the way back to the beginning of the question, and thank you for answering it properly before I went off on my rant. I do think, you're correct that like the way he's looking or he or she is looking when they play that ball, and then maybe a little bit of the mechanics. And also, I do think you can maybe sometimes look at the celebration too, where like if they have crossed that ball and if Pulisic hit that ball and then like immediately started running away, you know that like the fadeaway you'll see a basketball player do where they like shoot the ball and then they're like kind of already celebrating because they know it's going in.
Yep.
If the player is looking to celebrate, it means he or she has tried to do that versus if they're standing there like, oh, well that happened, then they probably weren't trying to so much.
All right, Tyler, I think we've got to get you out of here so you can go and coach the next generation. I think...
Correct.
I was trying to give you some advice. I think the thing to do with the under-6 age group is you've got to make sure that you explain the 18 zone system to them and tell them about the importance of zone 14. Make sure that is drilled into them.
Do you want to hear what my actual coaching is when we go to the scrimmage?
Yeah.
All right, let's try to pass. Let's try. Okay. Yeah, just dribble. Just dribble's fine. That's fine. That's usually what it is.
Well, I'm sure you're doing.
Messi is created, Daryl.
I'm sure you're doing fine work, Tyler. I'm sure you're doing fine work.
I try.
And you'll be back in studio with me to do more fine work when we do the thumbs up, thumbs down of all the weekend action, right? Including, I'll at least be watching Wolves play Birmingham on Sunday morning, and they need a win to guarantee promotion. They are 2 points away from promotion. Just to follow up on my guesswork at the end of the last show.
All right. Well, I'm excited for that. We'll definitely be watching and talking about that one. I'm sure.
I can literally hear you getting out of your car, getting ready to go. So on that note, I will say thank you for taking the time between coaching sessions to talk to me today.
Not right back at you, buddy, but you know what I mean.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We're going to end this podcast and I'm going to hang up on Taylor.